often cited in the sources as this amazing example, a huge architectural complex that functions as a incredibly precise set of astronomical instruments. It shows that dedication, that synthesis of architecture and scientific precision.
And math and medicine.
In math, they were adopting and adapting texts, bringing in knowledge from the Middle East and even Europe. And medicine saw this interesting integration of traditional Indian Ayurvedic practices, Persian Unani medicine, and even some early European medical knowledge getting compiled into comprehensive texts. Even just their detailed administrative record keeping contributed to early forms of statistics, really.
Okay, so moving more squarely into art and culture, the material really emphasizes this period as incredibly unique, largely because of that extensive patronage we started with.
It absolutely resulted in this vibrant tapestry, a remarkable fusion of Persian, Islamic, and Indian artistic elements.
The miniature paintings often come to mind first,
Yeah.
right? With that incredible detail, the bright colors.
And the sources back that up. They're not just beautiful objects, they're invaluable visual documents. They show us court life, illustrate classical stories, depict landscapes. They really capture the whole socio-cultural vibe of the time. And as we touched on before, the architecture, the grandeur of the forts, palaces, mosques, they cleverly integrated Persian forms like domes and arches with distinctly Hindu architectural features. Things like the lotus motif, intricate jolly screens, those little rooftop kiosks called chatras.
Right.
Calligraphy also became a major art form, used beautifully on manuscripts and monuments, adding layers of artistic skill and symbolic meaning.
The Hamzanama, commissioned by Akbar, gets highlighted as a kind of iconic example of this artistic output.
Yes, it was this enormous project, thousands of illustrations for a complex adventure story, really showcases the scale the imperial workshops could operate on and that blend of storytelling tradition and high-level craftsmanship.
And it wasn't just visual arts. The court was a hub for music and dance, too.
A very vibrant center. Emperors like Akbar were huge patrons of classical music. The legendary musician Tansen at Akbar's court is often presented in the sources as almost the symbol of this golden age for court music.
And dance forms, both local Indian styles and Persian-influenced ones, were popular and show up in those miniature paintings, too.
Yeah.
So patronage covered performing arts as well.
Absolutely. And the sources suggest music wasn't just entertainment. It was woven into the political and social fabric. Court musicians held high status. They were part of diplomatic exchanges, cultural diplomacy.
Interesting.
And this cross-cultural flow of musical ideas significantly shaped the development of Indian classical music as we know it, including the evolution of various instruments.
So if you pull all this together, the art, architecture, literature, music, what did this sustained patronage really mean for the wider development of Indian culture?
The material suggests it was profoundly transformative. It helped create this multifaceted cultural ethos that blended different traditions into something new, something syncretic. Literature was enriched by translations and new compositions in regional languages. The visual arts developed that distinctive, instantly recognizable Mughal style. And the architectural marvels, well, they still inspire design today. It really set the stage for a culture that, at its best, embraced diversity and fostered integration.
The sources also delve into the economics underpinning all this, describing a pretty sophisticated system that fueled the empire's prosperity.
Yes, trade and commerce really took off under the Mughals. The empire was perfectly placed geographically, acting as a major hub in global trade networks.
Connecting India with Central Asia, the Middle East, Europe.
Exactly. Facilitating the flow of incredibly valuable goods, spices, fine textiles, gems, and more.
And the emperors actively helped this.
Very much so, according to the sources. Through deliberate policies lowering trade barriers, providing security along the major trade routes. This boosted internal commerce and, importantly, attracted foreign merchants, bringing a lot of wealth into the empire.
And agriculture. That was the absolute bedrock, wasn't it?
Totally fundamental. The sources detail significant reforms aimed at boosting productivity and ensuring a steady flow of revenue. This included standardizing the tax collection systems.
To make it fairer, presumably.
Yes, and more efficient. And introducing advanced techniques like systematic land measurement, building expensive canal networks for irrigation, and promoting practices like crop rotation to keep the land fertile and maximize harvests.
And they standardized the money, too, which must have been crucial for large-scale trade.
Definitely. They set up a robust minting system, issuing standardized coins with the emperor's names and titles. This provided a reliable way to conduct business across the vast empire. The sources mention the main coins, the silver rupee, the gold moher, and the copper dam. often intricately designed too, reflecting the empire's stability and artistic standards.
It's a neat detail from the sources that the rupee wasn't actually a Mughal invention, right? It was introduced by an earlier ruler, Sher Shah Suri, and the Mughals adopted and really popularized it.
Right, which shows their pragmatism. They weren't afraid to build on existing systems if they worked well.
Okay, let's circle back to the art again, because the sources really hammer home that it was so much more than just decoration or aesthetic enjoyment. It was deeply tied into the socio-political system.
It absolutely was. It functioned as a primary tool for what we'd call imperial legitimization. Emperors used art and architecture to assert their authority, often linking it to divine right, projecting religious virtue, moral standing, basically solidifying their sovereignty.
Like those miniature paintings we mentioned, showing emperors with halos or sitting on symbolic thrones like cosmic hourglasses. The painting Jahangir, preferring a Sufi sheikh to kings, comes to mind. The messaging wasn't exactly subtle there.
Not at all. It was a highly deliberate visual code designed to emphasize their elevated, almost divinely endorsed status. And the architecture too, not just the Taj, but also the huge mosques like the Jama Masjid in Delhi. They were built not just for worship or burial, but as powerful public statements of the empire's permanence, its wealth, its piety, designed to inspire awe, respect, allegiance from everyone who saw them.
It sounds like they developed a very specific, codified visual language for statecraft itself.
That's how the sources describe it. A visual language reflecting hierarchy, order, control. Think about the Panchanama, that illustrated history of Shah Jahan's reign. The sources point out the meticulous detail in depicting court ceremonies, who stood where, the regalia, the posture of deference. It all visually reinforced the centralized power structure. Even the layout of the Red Fort progressing from the public audience hall, the Diwan-i-Imam, to the much more exclusive private hall, the Diwani-Khas, was carefully staged. It architecturally reinforced the emperor's presence, his status, and was adorned with that expensive pietra dura and calligraphy to signify refinement and almost divine authority.
So the act of patronage itself was a conscious political strategy.
Oh, absolutely. It was used very strategically to reward loyalty, to consolidate power, and, as we discussed, to promote a kind of shared imperial identity across that incredibly diverse empire. Akbar's court is the prime example the sources use, deliberately bringing together Hindu, Muslim, Persian, Central Asian artists. It visually represented his Suli-Kul policy.
That idea of universal tolerance.
Exactly. A policy of universal peace and tolerance that was actively promoted through cultural integration.
In commissioning translations of Hindu epics into Persian, illustrated by mixed teams of artists, that seems like a really concrete example from the sources of trying to integrate local traditions and foster cooperation.
It really is. And the sources also highlight the rise of artists of Indian origin, like Daswant, Basawan, Kesudas, within the imperial workshops. This suggests that artistic talent could, to some extent, overcome social barriers and fostered this inter-religious collaboration right at the heart of the court.
Art was also used for cultural diplomacy, interacting with other world powers.
Definitely. The sources describe the exchange of high-value gifts, luxurious textiles, intricate jewelry, illustrated manuscripts, miniatures with the Ottoman court, Safavid Persia, even European courts. These weren't just presents, they were sophisticated symbols.
Of what?
Of respect, status, cultural parity. They were part of the complex diplomatic dance between these major global powers.
And the Mughals weren't just sending things out, they were taking influences in. We mentioned Jesuit missionaries bringing European art.
Yes, bringing engravings, paintings, religious iconography. And the Mughals, particularly Jahangir, according to the sources, studied these works, had copies made, and selectively absorbed certain elements.
Like realism or perspective.
Exactly. Jahangir commissioned these fascinating